Hello lovelies, and welcome to today's video. I'm Alya and I'm really glad that you stopped by. We're going to be creating this really fun green smoky look today. I've got a bit of black going on in there too, just for a little bit of drama. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about a really important and a very common problem with eyes, and that is dry eye. So this has been specially requested. A friend of mine from uni and now a colleague has actually sent me through a few topics he'd like me to speak about, and I definitely see such a lot of dry eye. Oh my goodness, I think some days I feel like every single patient that comes through has dry eye. So I've definitely got a lot of experience treating it, and sometimes that means referring on, and sometimes that means home remedies and things like that. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that in this video. So if you're interested, please do stick around. As always with these bigger topics, it's a bit unpredictable with how long they take. So hopefully I can shorten it down a little bit for you guys, but this may be a bit of a long one. So if it is, just remember to watch it in 2x speed. I'm sure you'll still understand everything. And I hope you enjoy learning about the dry eye. I do want to say though that with whatever treatment you may try, it is very important that you do present to an eye specialist, whether it's your optometrist or ophthalmology or anyone that you have access to, because sometimes the diagnosis can be very difficult to depict even for the specialist, let alone for yourself at home. But if you're struggling and you're getting symptoms, there is absolutely nothing wrong and nothing unsafe about trying a preservative-free lubricant that's available over the counter all around the world. And what's important is to use it several times a day and consistently. So give yourself a real good chance of this lubricant having an effect. So I would start with something like 2 to 4 times a day and using it a lot, say for a week or 2. And then if you do feel that you're getting better, don't just stop. Just cut back to 1 or the occasional use, but do still consistently keep it up, at least with the occasional use. Otherwise, you'll just go back to where you were. All right, guys, hope you enjoy. I'm so excited about today's topic, you guys, and about the look I've come up with to show you. First of all, because it's something I do probably the most of at work. I definitely see more dry eye than anything else out there, more than anything, because a lot of the time it's a comorbidity. It's something that everyone has at least sometimes, maybe not chronically like a lot of people, but everybody will have experienced some dry eye at some point. And it's often really obvious to me because I do have to use certain tools in the clinic which allow me to see it, and often sometimes it gets in my way. Like the dry eye makes the photographs less quality, it makes the measurements harder to achieve. I've constantly got lubricating drops in the office in use for patients in order to be able to achieve quality scans and pictures and all that sort of stuff for them. And being in Melbourne, you do get a little bit of things like wind damage or sun damage or, just hay fever, things like that all the time, and it leads to this dry eye. And it sounds like, oh, dry eye, I get dry skin or I get dry scalp or whatever. It's a nuisance, but big deal. Yeah, it sounds like not a big deal, but it can cause so much pain and discomfort, and people come in saying, oh, my eye, and all it is dry eye. I mean, severe dry perhaps, but it causes such a disruption to them. So in order to talk about dry eyes, we first need to understand a little bit about how the eye is structured, okay? Because without understanding the anatomy, it's really hard to understand what's going on and how the different layers can contribute. So the first thing we need to think about is the lacrimal gland. I'm actually just putting a little bit of this agave on right over where the lacrimal gland sits. And what it does is it produces the most abundant of the layers of our tear film. It's the aqueous layer, and it sort of is exactly how it sounds. It's the water layer. So that water layer sits right between 2 other layers. One is a mucus layer and the other one is a lipid layer. Lipid meaning just fats. Okay, so the mucousy layer, that's the one that's the closest to the eye. That one's produced by these really funny cells called the goblet cells, and they actually are on our conjunctiva. So if you've ever had conjunctivitis or pink eye, that is the very thin see-through layer on top of our eye that actually is responsible for producing those very important cells. Then straight on top of those beautiful mucus cells, or that mucus layer, that gooey layer, sits the aqueous layer, or the salty water, the boohoo layer, if you like, the one that comes up in abundance when we're crying. And then on top of that, you have the ever important lipid layer, or the layer that's produced by the meibomian glands. Now those little meibomian glands actually sit in our lids. So if I was to flip my eye open, you'd see little white canals, well, hopefully they're not too white, little sort of wriggly canals, and those canals produce fats. They can often get congested or blocked and cause meibomian cysts or styes or chalasia, things like that. The idea of those glands is to produce that beautiful layer of lipid, specifically fat, that goes on the very, very top surface and stops the aqueous layer from evaporating. I'm going to apply a bit of New Moon black on top of my beautiful green that I've already got here. And I'm going to talk to you about the very most common and definitely the first thing we try with dry eye. Now, dry eye can be burning eyes, red eyes, sore eyes, stinging eyes. Any kind of painful eyes will typically have something to do with dryness. It could be caused by other things like toxicity, allergy, medication. It doesn't have to necessarily be something as simple as straight dry eye. It can be related to a lot of things. So definitely have them checked out. Don't just assume you have dry eyes and use drops, but you most definitely should consider that to be a factor, because the only part of the eye that actually feels pain is the top layer. The inside of the eye, just like the inside of the brain, doesn't actually have any pain receptors. So when things go terribly wrong on the inside, what you'll get is some referred pain, sure, or consequential pain because of, say, pressure or something like that, but you won't actually get eye pain unless there's a surface issue or a tear film issue, or something sort of rubbing on the eye. So yeah, so you go ahead and try some preservative-free eye drops. Now that's so important. I'm going to say it again, preservative-free eye drops. I cannot stress enough how important it is, if you're going to be using them for a long period of time or, you know, consistently on and off, to have a preservative-free drop. Now that is, you know, within its measures. There are sometimes a reason to use a preserved drop, but if you can avoid it and if you haven't had it recommended to you by your specialist, then try and go for non-preserved or preservative-free. And I've got some stills and some screenshots up for you guys here. So my favorite, my absolute favorite, is the Hylo Fort. There's also like the baby sister of Hylo Fort, Hylo Fresh, preservative-free. You'll see it says there, lubricating drops. Same brand does this drop here, Evolve, the Caramelose. Very, very cool fatty material, really good for lipid cell replacement. You've got Celluvisc. Celluvisc also has a baby sister that's not viscous like the Visc, it's liquidy. Another brand, very good, Sustain Ultra. This is all Australian, of course, so these might be available overseas, but they might be trading under a different name, for example. So look out for something that sort of looks like the same kind of picture, maybe with a different name. Often the marketing will be similar, but the box won't be, or the name won't be, rather. So Optive Fusion, another really good one. And the next sort of round of drops, so the next sort of era of drops, we'll talk about that in a moment. But the reason I talked about going for preservative free, the most common, and this is going to be a little bit gross to those of you who are here for the toxic free makeup, there is a really disgusting preservative that they use most commonly in eye drops, and that is BAK. Let me think, benzalkonium, I think it's called, benzalkonium chloride, I think. I feel like that's correct. I should have looked that one up too. Basically, you find that in toilet cleaner, and you find that in a lot of medication. It's gross. You know, they put such a small amount that they get away with it, but it's really effectively gross, and it can actually destroy those goblet cells that I was telling you about. The goblet cells that are the ones that produce that most inner layer, the mucus layer, destroys them. And we don't really, I mean, I don't really know. I shouldn't say we don't. I don't really know what other damage it could do, but I think long term, if you use any drops, whether they're for glaucoma or for dry eye or anything at all, if you can get onto the preservative-free options, and there's more and more and more becoming available all the time, if you can afford it, because often they're more expensive, go for it. I highly, highly recommend, because you do not want your tear film to suffer as a result, and you don't want toxicity of the eye as a result of your treatment. Now, am I saying stop your drops right this second because you've learned that there might be a little bit of preservative in there? Absolutely not. Until you have a safe and effective replacement, use the toxic stuff, better than nothing. But if you can have something better, that's the best, especially when it comes to glaucoma. So this is not a glaucoma video, but if you have glaucoma and you've been prescribed drops, if you miss them, you are doing yourself a massive disservice. That is, you're welcome. Okay, moving right along. So yeah, so please do avoid preservative if you can. There are better and better preservatives coming up on the market. So some drops are safer to use, even though they're preserved, than others. The way I judge it is basically if the drop has a long shelf life. For example, you can use it for 3 or 6 months after opening. Typically that's a safer preservative than the ones that have a 1-month shelf life. I don't know why it's all backwards, but that's just how it is. It tends to be that the longer the preservative is active, the more natural it sort of is. I don't know. There's a sort of relationship that I've noticed. At least at this point in time, that's been the case. All those old version of the drops or older formulas that expire after a month of opening, that's the actual preservative expiring, and that means it's a yucky preservative to begin with. Okay, so before I go on and talk about the next family of drops that you may want to or need to try, the reason that your tears might be going out of use or not being quality enough and causing your eye to be dry is either there's not enough being produced or they're evaporating too quickly. Now, if there's not enough being produced, it's probably because the meibomian glands are dysfunctioning, very common, or sometimes there's just not enough lipid in your whole system. And that lipid comes from beautiful omega-3s. So you're thinking fish, you're thinking nuts, seeds, avocados, things like that. And what I've found is the multi-formulas, the little supplements that are for dry eye, are fantastic. They often have a combination of vegan and fish-sourced omega-3. So you have your EPA and DHA, and then you've got your fish oils, and then you've got your vegan omega-3, usually through flaxseed. You can also take flaxseed oil. That's what I do when I get my dry eye bouts. I love it. I think that the flaxseed oil is a little bit more effective than just eating oily fish. I'm Russian, so in case you guys didn't already know, I eat a lot of fish, and I still do get a little bit of dry eye time to time, usually because of hay fever and things like that. But I find that the flaxseed is super, super effective. That's me personally. I also have found that through my patients, that just because they eat a good oily diet, it's not enough, and sometimes boosting that vegan component of the omega-3. I personally have a theory. It's just a theory, it's just a hypothesis, that because to break down a seed-based oil takes so much more steps, or so many more steps biologically, that it's just, I don't know, it just must trigger something in the system. That's my theory, because the pure fish oils don't do very much, except for thin the blood. So does flaxseed. It just thins the blood right down, a bit like aspirin would, for example. But other than that, it doesn't really do much. Whereas the flaxseed, everyone that I've recommended it to, probably 8 out of 10 people come back and say, yes, it works. So really, really keen on that flaxseed. And I know that it's a little bit more kind of a nice product in that people don't tend to get indigestion from it, or, you know, any kind of side effects like sometimes they do with the fish oils, because, you know, not all fish oils are created equally, whereas getting a nice organic flaxseed oil might be a little bit more attainable. The other thing is, if you are going to take a animal product, for example, a fish oil, even if it's just an ingredient in your dry eye multi, that is assuming you're taking some sort of supplement, make sure that it's a deep sea fish and that it's sourced somewhere where there's actually a deep sea. Like, you wouldn't want to say, you know, get something that's been sourced in the middle of somewhere that doesn't even have a deep sea, because I've seen that too, you know, where it comes from a country that they don't have any kind of fishing facility. So they might have seen that fish from there or that oil from there, but that's not where the fish is being caught. So you really want to know where your products are coming from. There's a lot of things on the market. I would just recommend you read the ingredients and decide what is best for you. So moving on to the next thing. So we've talked about the drops, preservative free, and the flaxseed or supplementing your body so that you have enough lipids. But what we haven't really touched on is what happens is if you're blocked up already, or if you're already inflamed, or if your dry eye is being caused by something external, something like, say, hay fever, because that's an example I already brought up. So again, personal experience, both clinically and also personally. Manuka eye drops, it's a product that I've discovered, or not discovered, it was recommended to me by my optometrist actually, a little while ago. It's like a natural anti-inflammatory. So if your issue is the actual inflammation, stopping your eye from functioning just because it's a little bit irritated or something like that, instead of going on to an anti-inflammatory drug, you can try Manuka drops for a couple of months. Now, the ironic thing about Manuka drops is they sting like there's 1,000 bees in your eyes, only for a few seconds, and it's completely tolerable, like it's completely comfortable after you've done it. But there have been patients who just could not persevere because it just stings. And that's fine, I get that. Because, you know, it isn't comfortable, and it's really hard to motivate yourself to do something that isn't so comfortable, especially when the reward isn't instantaneous. You know, it's not like your dry eye is going to go away or your irritation is going to go away after using it once. You're going to have to use it for a few weeks, my experience, or my patient's experience is more like a few months, because typically my patients have a much more severe experience than I do. My personal deal is the layer between my conjunctiva and the white of my eye, the sclera, tends to become inflamed for some stupid reason. Probably all the makeup I put on there, but hay fever and, you know, all this sort of stuff, stress, that kind of thing, small kids, bad sleep, all that stuff, all of it plays a big role. And I just tend to have these big old red inflammations on the whites of my eyes. They don't last long, but they really, really are very uncomfortable. I can't say they hurt, although I have had patients on whom they have been painful having the same thing. And yeah, and I find that the manuka really helps. If you have severe dry eye and it's not inflammatory, like there's no swelling, there's no sort of fluid retention around the eye, all of that stuff's not there, then what I would say is use something much thicker than the viscous products we discussed or the forts and things like that. You can go one step higher. I would also recommend to do that when you're not driving or working or doing anything vision related, because it's going to blur up your vision. And the product I absolutely love for this is a product called Vitaposs, or Vitamin A Poss. And now it's an ointment with vitamin A, with retinol, because vitamin A is extremely important for the eye surface. So it just literally deposits a bunch of gooey, sort of oily vitamin A straight onto the eye. And yeah, it just helps a lot, especially if someone's had like a scratch to their eye, or had a recent irritation that they've just got a dry eye as a sort of consequence of that irritation. It has worked miracles. Usually one tube, which is 5 ml, it's this tiny little tube, but one tube treatment is more than enough. So a few weeks is more than enough to resolve the initial symptoms. So really, really good thing. The other thing that's on the market is, or the other sort of approach that you can have is heating the eye. Again, only if there's no fluid. If you see even the slight bit of sort of swelling or anything around the eye or on the eye, do not heat that. You're probably going to rupture that fluid. It's not a good idea. So in that case, if you have any kind of swelling or sort of bloating or puffiness or anything like that, you want to put cold. If you're completely normal and your eyes are just sore and just irritated, heat. And there's a few different ways you can do it. You can steam, use vapor. You can use a wet towelette and put a heat pack on top, so getting this gentle, wet, sort of kind of gradual heat to the eye. There are definitely products specifically designed for this sort of matter, and I'll pop some examples up if I can find them. You can also get your drainage here, the ducts that sort of go between the eye all the way down the nose. You can get those flushed in case they're blocked or backed up. That's another option. That's something your ophthalmologist can help you with. Or you can try sort of specialized devices. Often optometrists or some ophthalmologists will do this. For example, IPL or intense pulse light, I think, IPL. It's a device that goes sort of literally into bursts intense light onto your closed eye, and the idea is that it sort of restarts all those processes, and people swear by it and people have had really good success with it. Sure, it's a little bit of extreme measure in my opinion, but we have sent people away to have it done, and they've had some results too, and these are people who have exhausted all other avenues but don't need surgery, kind of thing. The last thing that you might be experiencing is a little pathogen of some sort. For example, you might have a thing called Blephadex. Now, Blephadex is a little bug, like a little louse type thing, a lice, that lives inside the actual eyelash canal. And they're very, very hard to see. They're tinsy-wincy. They're a little bit transparent. So they blend in completely with the lid, and they burrow themselves inside the hair follicle. So you cannot see them without a microscope and without kind of encouraging them to come out, because they're just sitting there in their burrow. They cause extreme chronic irritation to the lids. You get this really, really bad blepharitis. Now, blepharitis is literally, bleph is the prefix for eyelid. So anything that's blepharoplasty, blepharitis, or blepharo, I should say, but anything that's bleph or blepharo is referring to the lids. So if you have this bug, then you would need something to get rid of a bug. Now, short of putting Mortine on your eyes, which I would never, ever recommend you do, would be a terrible idea. You can get foams or cleaning wipes or things like that are specifically for Blephadex. So usually they'll have some tea tree oil in there and maybe something moisturizing like a coconut oil or something like that, because those are the things that will absolutely irritate the bonkers out of these bugs, and they will crawl out of their tunnels and die from things like tea tree oil. Tea tree oil is very, very effective for that sort of stuff, but you wouldn't be allowed, or you wouldn't be able to just go and get some tea tree oil and stuff it on your eye. It would burn, and it wouldn't be very healthy for the actual apple or the actual eyeball of itself. It would be fine for the skin if it's diluted well, but not on the actual eyeball. So you really want it to come in an ophthalmically sound suspension or pre-made suspension. You can also potentially get just a regular eyelid cleaner and add a few drops of tea tree oil to it. That's another option. Or add a few tea tree oil drops to your makeup remover, for example. It's another way to do it. One of the other treatments we use for general inflammation that's causing dry eye is baby shampoo. So you get a really high quality, very natural, if you can, organic baby shampoo. Again, hopefully it has things like tea tree and lavender in there. And you dilute that with warm water, soap it up, and use that to wash your eyes. That often really helps to calm and soothe and replenish everything on the lids, which is where you get those beautiful glands that can then function properly to replenish everything on the surface of the eye. The other thing that I read about, I've not actually ever had a patient that's used the system. It's a system called Lippy Flow. It's kind of like the IPL, except that it uses heat. Same thing, the idea is that gentle heat blocks those lipid canals. So lipid is fat, fat is hard. Hard fat will not flow freely into the eye. It'll get congested a bit like a blocked pore or a pimple would, yeah, or a blackhead would, something like that. So short of having to milk them out, squeeze them out, which is a possibility, you can do that. It may damage the actual canal though if not done properly. To do it very gently and very effectively, what you can do is just apply light massage after a very, very good heat. You could even do it under the shower when the skin's really, really nice and heated up and everything is kind of gooey, so that hard lipid is now soft. You can just apply gentle massage. I would probably use my ring finger. This is my makeup side of me now speaking. If you use your ring finger, it tends to be a weaker finger and a bit more awkward to use, so you don't apply as much force as if you use this finger. You could very easily just stab yourself in the eye with your finger. Won't end well. So very gentle massages, especially concentrating where I'm going to smudge my eyeshadow doing this, but exactly where my eyeshadow is. So where I've smoked out the green and black, that's exactly where you want to be massaging. And that's also why I often spoke about in my earlier videos why when I apply mascara, I never ever go up to the actual skin. My mascara starts about, I don't know, I'd say at least 2 millimeters, 1.5 millimeters, something like that, away from the actual lash line or with the waterline. However, I'm not opposed, ironically, to putting products on my waterline. And that's because I feel like that area, that's sort of where the actual eyelash comes out, which is kind of like this from the inside of the eye. It sort of goes up and over. That area needs to be clear. You can do stuff inside of it, you can do stuff outside of it, you can do stuff away from it, but actually on it, try not to. I mean, if you're applying false lashes, for example, it's unavoidable. If you're getting lash extensions, it is avoidable. It's very avoidable, and a correctly applied lash extension will not sit on the actual attachment of the eyelash to the eyelid. It will sit away from it, and that's why it's important to brush them out and refill and try to avoid putting things like mascara on them, because all of that stuff can block you up and cause a very, very unpleasant sty or infection or worse. Okay, so I do hope I haven't forgotten to mention everything that I wanted to mention in this video. It's a big topic to come back with after having a few weeks off from my weekend segments, having to take a little bit of time off for the high holidays. So I hope that if you are celebrating, you had a really, really meaningful and wonderful time. And for everyone else, just had a few great weeks. And I hope that wherever you are, things are getting back to a little bit more of a normal. Certainly in Victoria, we've had a really, really hard, long stretch, and we are holding our fingers and toes and everything tightly in hope to get a little bit more freedom back. And our numbers are fantastic, honestly. Like, the way things have been handled was beyond horrible. I'm happy to freely share that opinion with anyone who cares to listen, but the results have been good. So our neighbours in New South Wales have achieved a very similar thing to us without some of the consequences that we've had to deal with in Victoria. But look, we're here now. We're on the home stretch of the really, really good numbers. We've had very, very few deaths comparing to the rest of the world. You know, we just need to go back to life, because mental health in Victoria, I would have to say, is not great. So a little bit of positivity, talking about how to relieve your dry eyes, especially with everyone doing everything remotely through computer screens. You're probably stressing out your eyes a little bit, and it doesn't hurt to use a little bit of a preservative-free eye drop. And of course, I'll say again, consistency is key. If you like this video, please don't forget to press like. Hit subscribe if it hasn't been done already, which means the button's red, and it shouldn't be red. Turn it grey. I hope you like the eye look as well. And for more things and more consistent updates and just everyday stuff, please go over to Instagram. And yeah, I've been doing a few reels, which is really, really fun. And yeah, so check those out too if you have a minute. Thanks so much for coming along, and stay safe. Bye, I'll see you in the next one.